Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. In today's story, a simple trip to the shop turns into a frustrating encounter that starts with empathy and ends with guilt tripping. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Helping isn't always appreciated the way you think it will be. The other evening, I was heading to the shop to pick up a few bits for dinner with my partner. It was just one of those normal nights, slightly chilly, people milling around, and I was walking at a relaxed pace, thinking about what ingredients we still had at home and what we might need to round out the meal. As I made my way down the street, I noticed a woman walking alongside me, looking like she'd seen better days. She was clearly homeless, carrying a couple of bags and layered and worn clothing. Now, I'm generally a pretty talkative person, and I've always believed that everyone deserves to be treated with basic respect. I used to work with people who were NFA, no fixed abode, so I know how much a little bit of normal human interaction can mean. So when she struck up a conversation, I didn't hesitate to respond. We talked casually as we walked. She told me a little about her day, shared some of her frustrations, and for a few minutes, it just felt like two strangers chatting, nothing more. Then as we approached the shop, she asked if I had any money to spare. I told her honestly that I didn't have any cash on me, which was true. I very rarely carry cash anymore, but I also didn't want the conversation to end on a note of disappointment. I was headed into the shop anyway, so I offered to buy her something if she was hungry. I figured that was a decent way to help without overcommitting myself or making a promise I couldn't keep. That's when her tone shifted. "I eat cold sandwiches all the time," she said flatly. "I just want a hot meal." At first, I didn't think much of it. I can imagine eating cold sandwiches day in and day out would wear on anyone. It's not just about the food, it's about comfort, normalcy, and having something warm in your stomach. So I nodded and replied, "No worries, they do other things in the shop too. They even have a hot counter." But she wasn't having it. "No, they don't do good stuff in there," she snapped back, waving her hand in dismissal. Then she pointed down the street and started walking in that direction. "My favorite restaurant's a 10-minute walk away. Can you take me there instead?" That's when I drew the line. I kept my tone polite but firm and said, "Sorry, I really can't do that. I've got somewhere I need to be soon." I once again offered to get her something from the shop, anything she wanted from there, hot or cold, but she wasn't interested in compromise. She suddenly stopped walking, turned around, and started to fake cry, loudly, right there in the middle of the path with people passing by. She started calling me a horrible person for saying no. "I can't believe you'd say that," she said, between fake sobs. "You're just like everyone else." At that point, I knew it was time to go. I don't do performative guilt tripping well, and I'm not the kind of person who responds well to emotional manipulation. I told her one last time that my offer still stood if she changed her mind, then turned into the shop and left her to it. Now, to be completely honest, I don't think she was trying to do anything sinister. We were in a well-lit, very busy area of town. She genuinely seemed to want a specific meal from a specific place. But what frustrated me was the emotional pivot from a friendly conversation to outright hostility because I didn't want to fund a sit-down restaurant dinner. It's encounters like this that make people tune out when they see someone asking for help. I try really hard not to become desensitized to homelessness. I know how easy it is to slip through the cracks and how difficult it can be to climb back out. That's why I always try to treat people with kindness and basic dignity. But experiences like this chip away at that impulse just a little bit. I still believe we need to show more humanity to people on the margins. It's just hard when some folks, intentionally or not, make it feel like you're being punished for trying to do the right thing. And this is why homeless people get a bad reputation. Between aggressive panhandling and entitled begging, it seems they forget that regular people are people too. I mean, I'm sorry you're in your situation, but nobody owes you a meal. If someone offers you X when you'd rather have Y, you better be grateful for X. If I were in that situation, I'd be grateful for any help I could get. And our second story. Don't like the way I park? Okay. A couple of months ago, I got into it with the neighborhood busybody. Let's call her Linda. The twist, we don't even have an HOA. But that doesn't stop her from acting like she's the queen of community standards. She's the type who leaves handwritten notes and flowery cursive on windshields, calls the city about invisible violations, and thinks slightly overgrown grass is a personal attack. The whole thing started because I parked my car on the street directly in front of my own house. Legal, by the book, and something I'd done for years without issue. That changed when Linda decided it was somehow ruining her view. One morning I found a note tucked under my wiper. "This is not a parking lot. Park in your driveway like a respectful neighbor. Don't make me involve the city." At first I rolled my eyes and tossed it, figured it was just one of those passive-aggressive outbursts and that she'd move on. But nope, a few days later she came stomping up to me while I was unloading groceries. She jabbed a finger at my car like it had personally insulted her. "I've told you before, parking on the street is inconsiderate. You have a driveway, use it." "It's public parking," I replied calmly. "My car's not blocking anything. I'm allowed to park here." She crossed her arms. "It doesn't matter. It's ugly and makes the neighborhood look bad. Park in your driveway or I'll report you." That's when I decided, all right, Linda, let's do this your way. I'll use the driveway, but I'm going to follow the rules exactly. See, my driveway's short. If I park my car in it, the back end sticks out just enough to block the sidewalk. Technically, that's against city ordinance. You can't obstruct pedestrian pathways, even if it's just your own car nose deep in your driveway. So the very next day, I pulled my car into the driveway, dead center, and yes, it completely blocked the sidewalk. Linda noticed. Of course she did. She marched right up, fuming as if I'd insulted her mother. "You can't block the sidewalk. That's illegal," she snapped. I looked at her all innocent. "Oh, I thought you wanted me to park in the driveway." "Not like that. Park properly." "There's literally no way to park in my driveway without blocking the sidewalk," I said with a shrug. "So I guess I'll have to go back to street parking." Her face twisted like she'd bitten a lemon. She stomped off again, grumbling something about people these days. I thought that was the end of it. But no, Linda wasn't finished. A week later, a city inspector showed up at my door, real polite guy. He explained that they'd gotten a complaint about illegal parking and just needed to take a look. I pointed to my car, legally parked, no fire hydrant, no driveway obstruction, nothing in violation. He nodded. "You're good," he said. "Honestly, we've had several calls from a woman in the neighborhood. Complaints like this keep coming in, but most of them don't hold water." I asked if he meant Linda. He chuckled. "I didn't say that," he replied, but his smirk said plenty. After that, she went quiet. I kept parking on the street. Life went on. But then last week, I came home to find her car parked in front of my house. Same spot she complained about. Day after day, she started leaving it there. I didn't say a word. I just waited because here's the thing. She parked just a tiny bit too close to the fire hydrant on the corner. Not blocking it outright, but definitely within the restricted zone. So I did what she loved doing. I called the city. The next morning, her car had a bright orange ticket slapped on the windshield. Later that day, I saw her standing outside, staring at it, absolutely fuming. She looked around, probably trying to figure out which one of her bad neighbors had turned the tables. Our eyes met for half a second as I backed my car legally into my driveway, smiled, and gave her a friendly little wave. She didn't wave back. Linda hasn't said a word to me since. I still park in front of my house when I want to, and her car, she parks it further down the street now, well away from mine, the hydrant, and the sidewalk. Funny how quiet things get when the HOA enforcer finally gets a taste of her own rules. Oh, so your car, legally parked in front of your house, is an eyesore, but Miss Holier-than-Thou can park her car on the street in front of your house to make a point? Why do people have to get so up in other people's business? I'm glad she got the ticket that she's been trying to get the city to give everyone else. And our last story. Karen from the HOA picked the wrong helpless victim. My name's Anna, and I lived a simple life in a quiet suburb. 2 kids, a husband, a sprinkle of inspiration, and a mountain of everyday worries. We weren't rich, but in our yard stood a true treasure, a wooden treehouse built lovingly by my husband and me for our kids. It was their childhood haven, a place for dreams, secrets, games. But then one spring, she showed up. Karen. Oh, Karen, a member of the HOA board who fancied herself the empress of the neighborhood. She appeared at our doorstep with a face sourer than old coffee and pointed at the treehouse. "This violates construction regulations. You must remove it immediately." I politely explained that it had no foundation, didn't disturb anyone, and stood entirely on our private property. But Karen didn't care. She waved around some printed nonsense called internal guidelines and threatened us with complaints and lawsuits and claimed the entire street is tired of the wild look of your tree. Honestly, it seemed like she had a grudge against any joy that wasn't hers. I tried to reason with her, even asked to talk privately to resolve things. One day, I was in the city center grabbing lunch with a friend when I spotted Karen in a restaurant with a man. At first, I assumed it was her husband, until I got closer. There she was, in a tight dress, wine in hand, giggling with a man who clearly wasn't her spouse. They sat close, touched under the table, and when his hand slid up her thigh, I instinctively took out my phone and snapped a photo. On any other day, I might have walked away, but I remembered my daughter's tears when she thought she'd lose her beloved treehouse. When I told my younger sister, Liza, who just moved in with me after quitting her job on a cruise ship bar, she smirked and said, "Karen wants war? Then let's give her a show." Liza hates injustice, and even more, hates when someone hurts her little nieces and nephews. Plus, she had time, so she acted in her own style. She started watching Karen's house, first casually, then methodically, jogging past in the mornings, walking our dog around her street at night, and on the fourth day, jackpot, a photo. The same mystery man arriving at Karen's house in the afternoon, entering, then 3 hours later, kissing her on the porch as he left. And that was just the beginning. Different days, different men. Liza and I gathered a whole gallery of evidence. I hesitated to do anything with it until Karen filed an official complaint to the city council. That was the final straw. I sent an anonymous envelope to her husband. No note, just the photos. 1 week later, we watched Karen packing boxes on her front lawn while her husband loaded 2 suitcases into his car, took the kids, and drove away. Karen's face looked like shattered glass, rage, confusion, panic. She never showed up at another HOA meeting again. A month later, her house went up for sale. Later, I learned her husband filed for divorce, applied for full custody, and Karen lost not only her family, but her only real support system, the financial cushion. Karen had never worked a day in her life. Her husband was some rich executive at a company, constantly away on business trips, but bringing in serious money. Now that was gone, and so was her reputation as the perfect suburban wife. No one listened to her anymore. She became a ghost. And me? I still have the treehouse. Only now it's also a symbol of victory over arrogance, over bullying. Life went back to normal. My sister found a new job. One evening, after Karen's house had been emptied and listed for sale, I saw a man pull up in a sleek coupe. He was clearly drunk, banging on the door, holding a bouquet. No one answered. He eventually tossed the flowers inside the house, shouted a string of curses at Karen, and drove off in a fury. I guess he was one of her lovers, just a bit too late. It was kind of hilarious. Karen tried to enforce order and tell others how to live, hiding behind rules, but she herself violated fundamental moral principles: loyalty, honesty, and integrity. In the end, it was her own double standards that led to her downfall. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.